The gunshot echoed through the pine forest, shattering the peaceful dawn as Dahlia Moore stumbled forward, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood blossomed across the back of her tattered dress as she pressed onward, her bare feet bloodied from the rocky terrain. Freedom was so close she could taste it, but the bullet lodged in her shoulder threatened to end her desperate flight before it truly began. New Mexico Territory. 1875. Dahlia had been running for hours, escaping the plantation where she'd been kept as a house servant since the war's end. Despite the Emancipation Proclamation 12 years prior, her master, Theodore Blackstone, maintained his hold over her through threats, violence, and isolation on his remote property just outside Santa Fe. When he'd announced his plans to sell her to a brothel owner to cover gambling debts, she knew she had to flee. The shot had come just as she'd crossed the property line. Now, miles from the plantation, her vision blurred as blood loss weakened her with each step. The rising sun offered little warmth against the spring morning chill. Mountains loomed ahead, and somewhere beyond them lay Fort Stanton, a place where she might find help, or at least lose herself among the busy frontier town. Dahlia's legs finally gave out beneath her. She collapsed against the trunk of a ponderosa pine, her breath shallow as darkness edged her vision. This was it then. Freedom had been just a fleeting dream, the sound of hoofbeats barely registered in her fading consciousness. A horse snorted nearby and boots crunched on the forest floor. "Good Lord," a man's voice muttered. "Miss, can you hear me?" Dahlia forced her eyes open to see a tall figure silhouetted against the morning sun. A cowboy, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat, knelt beside her. "They'll find me," she managed to whisper before consciousness slipped away. Zane Abernathy had been tracking a mountain lion that had been preying on his cattle for 3 days when he stumbled upon the wounded woman. She was young, perhaps 25, with skin the color of burnished copper and hair falling in dark waves around her shoulders. Her dress was torn and blood-stained, and the unmistakable wound of a gunshot marked her upper back. He didn't need to ask who they were. In these parts, a black woman running alone could only be escaping bondage, illegal bondage at that, given the years since emancipation. Zane's jaw tightened. His father had fought for the Union, and he'd been raised to believe slavery an abomination. That some still practiced it in secret enraged him. With gentle hands, he examined her wound. The bullet was lodged near her shoulder blade, a bad wound, but not immediately fatal if treated properly. Looking around, he knew he couldn't leave her here. Whoever had shot her might still be pursuing her. "Miss, I'm going to help you," he said, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "You're safe now." Decision made, Zane carefully lifted her onto his horse, mounting behind her to hold her steady. His cabin was several miles away, tucked into a hidden valley where few ventured. It wasn't much, but it would provide shelter and safety while she healed. As they rode, Dahlia's head lolled against his chest, her breathing shallow but steady. Zane urged his horse forward, acutely aware that the woman's life depended on his speed and the distance he could put between her and her pursuers. His cabin came into view as the sun reached its midday height. It was a simple structure, built by his own hands 3 years ago when he'd claimed his land. A small corral housed his spare horses, and a stream provided fresh water year-round. Most importantly, it was remote, accessible only by a winding trail that few knew existed. Zane carried Dahlia inside, laying her gently on his bed. Blood had soaked through her dress and his shirt where she'd rested against him during the ride. He gathered clean cloths, a basin of water, and the medical supplies he kept for emergencies, a necessity for a man living alone in the wilderness. The bullet would have to come out. Zane had removed bullets before, but never from a person. Still, the principles were the same, and leaving it in would surely kill her. As he cut away the fabric around her wound, Dahlia stirred, her eyes fluttering open in panic. "Be still," he said softly, trying to keep his voice calm and reassuring. "I'm trying to help you. Who are you?" She whispered, trying to move away despite her weakness. "Name's Zane Abernathy. I found you in the forest. You've been shot." "I know that," she replied with unexpected spirit despite her condition. "Why are you helping me?" Zane paused, meeting her fearful gaze. "Because it's the right thing to do. Now, I need to remove that bullet or infection will set in. It's going to hurt something fierce." Dahlia's eyes, dark and intelligent, searched his face. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her, because she gave a slight nod. "Do what you must." Zane offered her a strip of leather to bite down on, then a swig of whiskey from a bottle he kept for medicinal purposes. "This will help with the pain," he explained. The procedure was brutal but necessary. Dahlia bit down hard on the leather, muffling her screams as Zane carefully extracted the bullet with a pair of sterilized tweezers. Once removed, he cleaned the wound with whiskey, causing her to arch in agony, before stitching it closed with neat, careful stitches. Throughout it all, she remained conscious, her eyes squeezed shut, tears streaming down her face. "You're brave as any man I've ever met," Zane told her as he finished bandaging the wound. "Braver than most." Dahlia's breathing gradually steadied as the worst of the pain subsided. "Dahlia," she whispered, "my name is Dahlia Moore." "Rest now, Dahlia Moore," Zane replied, pulling a blanket over her. "You're safe here." As she drifted into an exhausted sleep, Zane stood at the window, watching the trail that led to his cabin. Whoever had shot her might still be searching, and he needed to be prepared. He checked his Winchester rifle and placed it near the door, then gathered supplies to erase any evidence of their passage to the cabin. For the next 2 days, Dahlia drifted in and out of consciousness, fever claiming her as infection fought to take hold. Zane stayed by her side, applying cool compresses to her forehead and cleaning her wound regularly. He brewed healing teas from herbs his Cherokee neighbor had taught him to use and spooned broth into her mouth whenever she was lucid enough to swallow. On the 3rd morning, her fever broke. Zane awoke from where he'd been dozing in a chair beside the bed to find Dahlia watching him, her eyes clear for the first time since he'd found her. "You stayed," she said simply. Zane straightened, rubbing sleep from his face. "Of course I stayed. Couldn't very well leave you to fend for yourself." "Most would have," she countered, "or turned me in for a reward." "I'm not most people," Zane replied, standing to check her wound. The angry red had faded and the skin was knitting cleanly. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been shot." Dahlia attempted a smile, wincing as the movement pulled at sore muscles. "But better than I expected to feel." "You'll live," he confirmed. "Though you had me worried for a spell there." Dahlia tried to sit up, grimacing with the effort. Zane moved to help her, arranging pillows behind her back to support her. "Thank you," she said, looking around the cabin for the first time. It was a simple space, one large room with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 2 chairs, shelves holding books and supplies, and the bed she currently occupied. "This is your home," Zane nodded. "Such as it is. Not much, but it serves me well enough." "It's lovely," she said sincerely. "Peaceful. Are you hungry? I've got stew on the fire." At her nod, he ladled a bowl of venison stew and brought it to her with a chunk of cornbread. As she ate slowly at first, then with increasing appetite, Zane could see strength returning to her frame. "How long have I been here?" she asked between bites. 3 days now." Alarm flashed across her face. 3 days. "They could be. No one's coming," Zane assured her. "I've been watching the trails. Covered our tracks too. Whoever's after you doesn't know this valley exists." Dahlia studied him, her spoon paused midway to her mouth. "Why are you risking so much for a stranger? For someone like me," Zane met her gaze steadily. "What do you mean, someone like you? A runaway?" She hesitated. "A Negro woman." "I see a person who was wrongfully held against her will and shot for seeking freedom," Zane replied. "Nothing more, nothing less." Dahlia's eyes widened at his words, then filled with tears she quickly blinked away. "My former master, is Theodore Blackstone. He has a plantation outside Santa Fe. After the war, he just kept us, said the new laws didn't apply to him, most believed him or were too scared to run. And you weren't," a shadow crossed her face. "I was, for years. But then I overheard him making arrangements. He lost heavily at cards, and to settle the debt, he was going to sell me to a man who owns a brothel in Albuquerque." Her hands trembled. "I couldn't let that happen." Anger flared in Zane's chest. "No, you couldn't. And you shouldn't have had to run at all. The war ended a decade ago. Slavery with it." "Not everywhere," Dahlia said softly. "Not really." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words hanging between them. "You need to rest," Zane finally said, taking her empty bowl. "When you're stronger, we'll figure out what comes next." Over the next week, Dahlia regained her strength gradually. The wound healed cleanly, though she would always carry the scar, both physical and otherwise. Zane showed her how to move her arm to prevent stiffness, and soon she was able to help with small tasks around the cabin. They fell into an easy rhythm. Dahlia took over cooking, proving skilled at turning Zane's simple provisions into flavorful meals. In return, he taught her about the land, which plants were edible, which medicinal, which to avoid. She absorbed the knowledge eagerly, asking intelligent questions that impressed him. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, and Zane read aloud from his small collection of books. He'd noticed how her eyes lingered on the volumes, though she never touched them. "Can you read?" he asked one night, closing the copy of Walden he'd been reading from. Dahlia hesitated, then shook her head. "It was forbidden. Blackstone said educated slaves got ideas." "He wasn't wrong about that," Zane replied with a slight smile. "Would you like to learn?" The hope that sparked in her eyes was answer enough. That night, they began with the alphabet, Zane carefully guiding her through each letter. Dahlia proved a quick study, her determination evident as she practiced forming letters in the ashes at the edge of the hearth. "You're a natural," Zane told her as she successfully spelled her own name for the first time. Dahlia beamed with pride, a smile transforming her face. It struck Zane then how beautiful she was, not just in features, but in spirit. Her resilience, her eagerness to learn, her quiet strength in the face of all she'd endured, these qualities drew him to her in ways he hadn't anticipated. He caught himself watching her more often as the days passed, admiring the graceful way she moved about the cabin, the thoughtful expression that crossed her face when she was concentrating on her reading lessons, the rare but radiant smile that appeared when she mastered something new. For her part, Dahlia found herself growing comfortable in Zane's presence. He was unlike any man she'd ever known, gentle yet strong, educated yet humble, principled yet kind. He never made her feel lesser, never spoke down to her, never questioned her right to freedom and dignity. 2 weeks after her arrival, Zane returned from checking his trap lines to find Dahlia standing on the porch, her face turned toward the mountains. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "I never knew the world could be so vast," she replied softly. "At the plantation, all I saw were the same fields, the same buildings, day after day. The mountains were just a distant blue line. Now look at me standing among them." Zane studied her profile, struck by the wonder in her expression. "What will you do when you're fully healed?" he asked, voicing the question that had been weighing on him. Dahlia turned to him, uncertainty in her eyes. "I don't know. I have no money, no education, no family." "You could go to Fort Stanton," Zane suggested, though the words seemed to stick in his throat. "There's work there for a woman willing to cook or clean. The Army fort brings steady business." "Is that what you think I should do?" There was a vulnerability in her question that made Zane pause. What did he want her to do? The answer came with surprising clarity. He wanted her to stay. The thought of returning to his solitary existence after these weeks in her company left him hollow. "What I think doesn't matter," he said carefully. "For the first time in your life, the choice is yours alone." Dahlia looked down at her hands. "Not entirely alone. I have your guidance if you're willing to give it. Always," he promised. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Dahlia broached a subject she'd been avoiding. "Tell me about yourself, Zane Abernathy. I've been here nearly 3 weeks, and I know so little about you." Zane poked at the fire, sending sparks up the chimney. "Not much to tell. I came west after the war. My father died at Antietam, fighting for the Union. Mother followed a few years later, consumption. With nothing holding me in Pennsylvania, I decided to see the territories." "And you ended up here, alone in the mountains. Worked as a ranch hand for a few years, saved every penny. When I had enough, I staked my claim on this land, built the cabin myself. It's not much, but it's mine." He glanced around the simple space. "Some might call it lonely, but I've always valued my solitude." "Until now?" Dahlia asked softly. Their eyes met across the firelight, and something unspoken passed between them. "Until now," Zane agreed, his voice equally quiet. The moment was broken by the distant sound of horses approaching. Zane was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. "Stay inside," he instructed, moving to the window. Through the gathering dusk, he could make out 3 riders coming up the trail. "Looks like we have visitors." Dahlia's face paled. "Blackstone, can't tell yet." "Hide in the root cellar, just in case." Zane lifted the trapdoor in the kitchen floor, revealing a small storage space dug into the earth below the cabin. Dahlia descended quickly, and he closed the door after her, covering it with a rug before moving to the porch, rifle in hand. As the riders drew closer, relief washed through him. It was just Jacob Turner and his sons from the neighboring ranch, not pursuers. Still, Zane remained cautious. Word traveled fast in these parts. "Evening, Zane," Jacob called, reining in his horse. "Hope we're not disturbing you." "Not at all, Jacob. What brings you this way?" The older man dismounted, his sons remaining on horseback. "Hunting party came through our place yesterday, looking for a runaway woman. Offered a handsome reward for information." Zane kept his expression neutral. "Is that so?" Jacob nodded. "Said she was dangerous, stole valuable property before fleeing, shot one of their men too." "Sounds serious," Zane commented, his grip tightening on his rifle. "You come to warn me to keep an eye out," something like that. Jacob glanced back at his sons, then lowered his voice. "Thing is, the man leading the search, Theodore Blackstone, I knew him during the war. He was no gentleman then, and he's no gentleman now." Jacob spat on the ground. "Claimed this woman was his property in 1875, said the government had no right taking what was his." Zane's pulse quickened. "What did you tell him?" "Told him I hadn't seen any woman, which was true enough. Then I sent him north, toward the high country. Said there were caves up there where fugitives sometimes hide." Jacob's weathered face broke into a grim smile. "Should keep them busy for a few days at least." Understanding dawned on Zane. "You came to warn me." "I fought for the Union too, Zane. My brother died freeing slaves. I'd not see that sacrifice dishonored." Jacob's eyes flicked toward the cabin. "If you were harboring someone who needed protection, I'd want you to know Blackstone's in the territory, and that my family and I would stand with you. Gratitude washed through Zane. "I appreciate that, Jacob, more than I can say." The older man nodded. "They're staying at Fort Stanton for now. 3 men total. Blackstone and 2 hired guns. Mean-looking sorts. I'll keep that in mind." After Jacob and his sons departed, Zane hurried inside to release Dahlia from the root cellar. Her face was tight with fear as he explained the situation. "He won't stop looking," she said, sinking onto a chair. "Not until he finds me or confirms I'm dead." Zane knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "He won't find you here, but Jacob's right. Fort Stanton isn't safe for you now." "Nowhere is safe," Dahlia whispered. "As long as Blackstone lives, I'll never be truly free." "There are other options," Zane said. "We could leave the territory, head to California perhaps, start fresh where no one knows us." Dahlia's eyes widened at the us in his statement. "You would leave your home, for me?" Zane hadn't planned to make such an offer, but now that the words were spoken, he realized they were true. "This cabin is just wood and stone. Home is." He hesitated, suddenly aware of how deeply his feelings for Dahlia had grown. "Home can be wherever you make it." Emotion welled in Dahlia's eyes. "Zane, I can't ask that of you." "You didn't ask, I offered." He squeezed her hands. "But we don't have to decide tonight. Let's see what tomorrow brings." Tomorrow brought heavy clouds and the first pattering of rain against the cabin roof. They spent the day indoors. Zane teaching Dahlia more letters and simple words, her progress remarkable for someone who had never been allowed to read. As evening approached, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof and windows. The cozy confines of the cabin seemed to draw them closer, both physically and emotionally. They prepared dinner together, moving around the small kitchen in a dance that had become familiar over the weeks. Over the meal, Dahlia shared more about her life before her mother, who had taught her to cook, and so before being sold away when Dahlia was just 8. The elderly woman who had raised her after that, teaching her healing with herbs and plants. The young man she had cared for who had been beaten to death for attempting escape. "I was 14 when they killed him," she said, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "That's when I knew I would run someday. I just needed the right moment." "And courage," Zane added. "Don't diminish that. What you did took incredible bravery." Dahlia looked up at him, a soft smile touching her lips. "You make me feel brave, Zane Abernathy." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Zane cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how much he wanted to close the distance between them, to feel her in his arms not as a wounded woman he was caring for, but as someone he cherished. "I should check the horses," he said abruptly, standing. "Make sure they're secure with this storm." Outside, the rain soaked him within moments, but he welcomed the cool clarity it brought. His feelings for Dahlia had grown beyond protection or kindness. He desired her not just physically, but completely. He wanted her wit, her strength, her determination in his life permanently. But was it fair to her? She had just escaped one man who sought to control her life. The last thing she needed was another making claims on her future. When he returned to the cabin, drenched and thoughtful, he found Dahlia adding wood to the fire. She looked up as he entered, concern crossing her face. "You're soaked through," she chided, getting a towel. "Here." As she handed him the towel, their fingers brushed and neither pulled away. For a long moment they stood frozen, the simple touch electric between them. "Dahlia," Zane began, his voice rough with emotion. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't say you're sorry or that this is wrong or that you shouldn't feel what I know you feel." "How do you know what I feel?" he asked, searching her face. "Because I feel it too." She stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. "Every day a little more." Zane covered her hand with his own, his heartbeat strong beneath her palm. "You've known nothing but captivity. I don't want you to feel obligated or grateful to me. Is that what you think this is? Gratitude? There was fire in her eyes now. I was grateful when you pulled the bullet from my shoulder. I was grateful when you taught me my letters. This, she pressed her hand more firmly against his chest. This is something else entirely. The dam broke. Zane pulled her to him, his lips finding hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly blazed into something more urgent. Dahlia responded with equal fervor, her arms winding around his neck as she pressed herself against him. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, their foreheads pressed together. I have wanted to do that for weeks, Zane confessed. Dahlia smiled, a true, unreserved smile that lit her entire face. Then why did you wait so long? Their second kiss was deeper, more knowing. The rain continued to fall outside, enclosing them in a world of their own making, where the past receded and only the present moment mattered. Later, as they lay together in the narrow bed, Dahlia's head on Zane's chest, he traced gentle patterns on her bare shoulder, carefully avoiding the still healing wound. "Come with me to California," he said softly into the darkness. "We'll build a new life there." Dahlia propped herself up to look at him. "Is that what you truly want?" "I want you, Dahlia Moore, safe, free, and by my side." She touched his face tenderly. "Then yes, but first there's something I must do." The next morning dawned clear after the storm. Dahlia explained her plan, a dangerous one that made Zane's blood run cold. "Absolutely not," he said firmly. "It's too risky." "It's necessary," Dahlia countered. "As long as Blackstone lives, he'll hunt me, and others like me. There are still 5 women and 3 men held at his plantation. They deserve freedom too. And they can have it, but not at the cost of your life," Zane argued. "Let's get the law involved. The territorial marshals, the law." Dahlia laughed bitterly. "The law hasn't helped us in 10 years. Why would it start now?" "The marshal in Santa Fe dines at Blackstone's table twice a month." Zane ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Then we'll find another way, one that doesn't involve you walking straight into the lion's den." But Dahlia was resolute. "I know the plantation. I know its rhythms, its weaknesses. And I know where Blackstone keeps his documents, the false bills of sale he uses to claim ownership of people. With those papers, even a corrupt marshal couldn't ignore the evidence." They argued for hours, neither willing to yield. Finally, Zane saw that Dahlia would not be swayed. "Then I'm coming with you," he declared. "We do this together or not at all." Relief flooded Dahlia's face. "I was hoping you would say that." The plan they formed was dangerous but precise. They would wait for Blackstone to return to his plantation, leaving Fort Stanton behind. According to Jacob, who rode over to confer with them, the search party planned to head back in a day or two, convinced the fugitive had fled north. "Once they're gone," Zane said, tracing their route on a rough map, "we'll make our way to the plantation. You know the layout, the routines. We get in, find the documents, free the others if possible, and get out." "And if we encounter Blackstone?" Dahlia asked quietly. Zane's expression hardened. "Let's hope we don't." They spent the next 2 days preparing. Zane showed Dahlia how to use a revolver not to kill, but to defend herself if necessary. They packed supplies, planned escape routes, and discussed contingencies. The night before they were to depart, they sat outside the cabin, looking up at the stars that scattered the vast New Mexican sky. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Dahlia said, her hand finding Zane's, "know that these weeks with you have been the freest, most joyful time of my life." Zane lifted her hand to his lips. "Many more to come," he promised. "A lifetime of them." In the soft glow of the stars, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple ring fashioned from a silver coin. "I made this today," he said, suddenly nervous. "It's not much, but it's perfect." Dahlia breathed as he slid it onto her finger. Absolutely perfect. Their journey to the Blackstone plantation took a full day of hard riding. They approached from the west, using the cover of a stand of cottonwoods to observe the sprawling house and outbuildings. From their vantage point, they could see activity in the fields, men and women working under the watchful eye of an overseer. "There's Jenkins," Dahlia whispered, pointing to a barrel-chested man on horseback. "Blackstone's right hand, mean as they come." Zane noted the rifle slung across Jenkins's back. "How many more guards?" "Just one other, usually. Cole. He patrols the house at night." Dahlia's voice was steady, but Zane could feel her tension. "Blackstone keeps his study locked, but I know where he hides the key above the door frame. That's where the documents will be." They waited until nightfall before making their move. Leaving their horses secured in the cottonwood grove, they approached on foot, using the darkness as cover. The main house loomed ahead, lights burning in only a few windows. "The kitchen entrance," Dahlia whispered. "Mariah will be there. She'll help us." They slipped through the garden, keeping to the shadows. The kitchen door was unlocked, as Dahlia had predicted. Inside, a middle-aged black woman was kneading bread dough. She startled at their entrance, then gasped when she recognized Dahlia. "Child," she exclaimed in a hushed voice, embracing Dahlia fiercely. "We thought you were dead." "Not yet," Dahlia replied with a grim smile. "Mariah, this is Zane. He saved my life. We're here for the papers and to help everyone escape." Mariah's eyes widened. "It's not safe. Blackstone returned this morning in a foul mood, been drinking heavily since dinner." Zane and Dahlia exchanged concerned glances. "This complicated matters. Is he in his study?" Dahlia asked. Mariah shook her head. "Passed out in the parlor last I saw. Cole's on watch by the front door. And Jenkins went to town. Won't be back till morning." Dahlia nodded, her mind working quickly. "Can you gather the others? Tell them to be ready to leave tonight." Mariah hesitated. "All of them, even old Samuel. His legs aren't what they used to be." "All of them," Dahlia confirmed. "Zane has a wagon waiting in the grove. Get what supplies you can without raising suspicion." As Mariah slipped out to spread the word, Zane turned to Dahlia. "I thought we were just getting the documents. Plans change," she replied simply. "I can't leave them behind, not now that freedom is so close." Zane knew better than to argue. Instead, he asked, "What's our new plan?" "The study first. Then we deal with Cole. If we're lucky, Blackstone will sleep through it all." They weren't lucky. The study door creaked as they opened it, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet house. They froze, listening, but no alarm was raised. Inside, Dahlia went straight to the large desk, pulling open drawers while Zane stood watch at the door. "Got them," she whispered triumphantly, holding up a sheaf of papers. Bills of sale, forged documentation, even letters discussing human trafficking. "It's all here." A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Zane tensed, drawing his revolver. A moment later, Theodore Blackstone appeared in the doorway, a shotgun in his hands, his face contorted with rage and alcohol. "I knew you'd come back, you ungrateful wench," he slurred, leveling the shotgun at Dahlia. "Thought you could steal from me and get away with it." Zane stepped between them, his revolver aimed at Blackstone's chest. "Lower your weapon," he commanded. Blackstone's bloodshot eyes shifted to Zane. "And who the hell are you?" "Another thieving abolitionist." "I'm the man who's going to see you hanged if you don't put down that shotgun," Zane replied evenly. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, a commotion erupted elsewhere in the house, voices shouting, footsteps running. Distracted, Blackstone glanced away. Zane seized the moment, lunging forward to wrestle the shotgun from his grasp. The two men grappled, crashing into furniture. The shotgun discharged into the ceiling, sending plaster raining down. Dahlia scrambled for the fallen documents, stuffing them into her shirt. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement. Cole appeared in the doorway, his own gun drawn. "Zane, behind you," she cried. Zane ducked as Cole fired, the bullet whizzing past to embed itself in the wall. Before Cole could fire again, a heavy cast iron skillet connected with the back of his head. He crumpled, revealing Mariah standing behind him, the makeshift weapon still raised. "Always hated that man," she muttered. Meanwhile, Blackstone had broken free of Zane's grip and was reaching for a derringer hidden in his desk drawer. Dahlia saw it first and shouted a warning. Zane spun, firing his revolver. The bullet struck Blackstone in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to his knees. "It's over, Blackstone," Zane said, keeping his gun trained on the wounded man. "The papers Dahlia took prove what you've been doing. Slavery ended a decade ago, but you've kept these people in bondage illegally." Blackstone glared up at him, blood seeping between the fingers clutched to his shoulder. "They're my property," he spat. "The government had no right, they're human beings," Dahlia cut in, her voice stronger than Zane had ever heard it. "Not property. Not now, not ever." Outside, the sound of horses approaching sent a fresh wave of panic through them. "Jenkins," Mariah warned, "must have come back early." "Get everyone out now," Zane instructed. "Through the kitchen and to the grove. We need to move quickly." Mariah nodded and disappeared to gather the others. Dahlia hesitated, looking at Blackstone. "What about him?" Zane considered for a moment. "We'll take him with us. He'll stand trial for what he's done." Binding Blackstone's hands and forcing him to his feet, they made their way through the house. In the kitchen, they found the other enslaved people, 8 in total, including Mariah and an elderly man who must have been Samuel. "This way," Zane directed, leading them out into the night. They had almost reached the cottonwood grove when shouts erupted behind them. Jenkins had discovered the empty house and unconscious Cole. "Run," Zane urged, helping Samuel along as Dahlia led the way to where their horses and wagon waited. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets whizzing through the darkness. One of the women cried out, struck in the arm, but kept moving. Reaching the grove, they quickly loaded everyone into the wagon Zane had hidden there earlier. Blackstone they tied securely, gagging him to prevent him from calling out. "I'll drive," Zane told Dahlia. "You ride alongside. If Jenkins follows, you'll need to hold him off." Dahlia nodded, mounting one of the horses with practiced ease despite her still healing wound. The fear that had dominated her life for so long was gone, replaced by a fierce determination. They set off at a gallop, the wagon bouncing over the rough terrain as they headed away from the plantation. Behind them, Jenkins and 2 other men gave chase on horseback. "Faster," Dahlia called to Zane, who urged the team on with a crack of the reins. The pursuit continued for miles, a desperate race across the moonlit landscape. Jenkins was gaining, his fresher horse closing the distance. When he came within range, he opened fire. Dahlia turned in her saddle, the revolver Zane had given her steady in her hand. She aimed not at Jenkins but at his horse, firing a shot that went wide. "Get down," Zane shouted as Jenkins returned fire. A bullet splintered the edge of the wagon seat, inches from Zane's leg. In the back, the freed people huddled low, protecting themselves and each other. The chase led them toward a narrow canyon, a risky route, but one that would force their pursuers to ride single file, reducing their advantage. "The canyon," Dahlia called to Zane. "We can lose them there." Zane steered the team toward the opening, the wagon wheels skidding on loose gravel. As they entered the canyon, the walls rose high on either side, the path narrowing dangerously. Jenkins followed, now just 50 yards behind. In the confined space, His shots echoed deafeningly. Dahlia made a split-second decision. Pulling her horse to a stop, she dismounted at the canyon entrance, positioning herself behind a boulder. As Jenkins and his men thundered into the canyon, she took careful aim and fired. Her shot hit its mark, not Jenkins, but the canyon wall above him. Rock fragments rained down, startling the horses and causing momentary chaos. Using the distraction, Dahlia fired again, this time striking Jenkins's horse in the flank. The animal reared in pain, throwing its rider before bolting back the way it had come, followed by the other horses. Jenkins landed hard, his rifle clattering away from him. Before he could recover, Dahlia was on him, her revolver aimed at his head. "Don't move," she commanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Jenkins froze, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You," he growled. "You're supposed to be dead." "Sorry to disappoint," Dahlia replied coldly. By then, Zane had halted the wagon and returned to her side, his own weapon trained on Jenkins's companions, who had been unseated in the commotion. "On your feet," Zane ordered them. "Hands where I can see them." With Jenkins and his men disarmed and secured, they continued their journey, now with 3 additional prisoners. Their destination was the territorial capital, where they would present the documents to the federal marshal, a man Zane knew from his army days, one who couldn't be bought by plantation money. The journey took 3 days, during which the freed people began to comprehend their new reality. Some wept with joy, others remained wary, as if freedom might be snatched away at any moment. Samuel told stories of his life before captivity, memories preserved for decades in the hope of someday sharing them in freedom. Dahlia moved among them, offering comfort, sharing her own experiences of the past weeks, and speaking of the future that awaited them all. Watching her, Zane felt his heart swell with pride and love. When they reached the territorial capital, the federal marshal was shocked by their evidence but acted swiftly. Blackstone, Jenkins, and the others were jailed pending trial. The documents Dahlia had stolen proved damning not just for Blackstone, but for several other wealthy landowners who had continued the practice of slavery in secret. "This will cause quite a stir," the marshal told them after taking their statements. "You've done a brave thing, both of you. But it might not be safe for you to remain in the territory. Blackstone has friends in high places." "We're headed to California," Zane replied, his arm around Dahlia's shoulders. "As soon as this is settled." The freed people chose different paths. Mariah and 3 others decided to stay in the capital, where the marshal promised to help them find legitimate work. 2 young men opted to travel north to Colorado. Samuel and the wounded woman, Martha, asked to accompany Zane and Dahlia to California. "I always wanted to see the ocean before I died," Samuel explained with a gentle smile. 2 weeks later, after testifying at the preliminary hearing that sent Blackstone to trial, they set out westward. The wagon was loaded with supplies, their spirits high despite the challenges that lay ahead. The journey to California would be long and arduous, crossing deserts and mountains, but they faced it together. Each night as they camped under the vast starry sky, Dahlia and Zane planned their future, a small farm perhaps, or a ranch where they could live freely and build a family. One evening as they sat by the campfire, Samuel watching the flames while Martha slept nearby, Dahlia took Zane's hand in hers. "I never thanked you properly," she said softly. "For what?" Zane asked, puzzled. "For finding me that day in the forest, for seeing me as a person worth saving." Zane lifted her hand to his lips. "You saved yourself, Dahlia. I just helped you heal." She smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "We saved each other, I think." As the fire crackled and the stars wheeled overhead, Zane knew she was right. He had been alone for so long, convinced solitude was his fate. But in saving Dahlia, he had found something he hadn't known. He was missing: connection, purpose, love. California awaited them, a new beginning in a land where they could build a life unfettered by the past. A life together, bound not by chains or ownership but by choice and love. "We should get married," Zane said suddenly, "when we reach California. A proper wedding." Dahlia looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I would like that very much." They reached California in the late summer of 1875, the journey having taken nearly 2 months. The landscape transformed around them as they traveled from the arid plains of New Mexico to the rugged mountains of Arizona, through the harsh Mojave Desert, and finally into the fertile valleys of California. They settled in a small community north of San Francisco, where the redwoods met the sea. With the money Zane had saved over the years, they purchased a modest plot of land with a view of the Pacific. Samuel got his wish to see the ocean, standing at the cliff's edge with tears streaming down his weathered face. "Lord Almighty," he whispered, "it's more beautiful than I ever imagined." The local community welcomed them, asking few questions about their past. Martha found work as a seamstress in town, while Samuel, despite his age, became beloved by the local children for his storytelling abilities. Zane and Dahlia built their house with their own hands, a sturdy structure of redwood and stone that would withstand the coastal storms. During construction, they slept in a tent, falling asleep to the sound of waves crashing against the shore. They were married that fall, a simple ceremony performed by the local justice of the peace. Dahlia wore a dress of pale blue, sewn by Martha, with wildflowers in her hair. Zane, cleaned up and nervous, waited for her under an arch of twisted driftwood. "Never thought I'd see the day," Samuel chuckled as they exchanged vows. "The runaway and the cowboy. Life sure takes unexpected turns." Their first years in California were ones of growth and healing. Dahlia's reading and writing improved until she could devour Zane's books and write her own stories. She started a small garden that expanded each year, growing herbs and vegetables that she sold in town. Zane raised horses, his skill with the animals earning him respect throughout the region. Together, they built a life of purpose and peace, far from the shadows of the past. News reached them occasionally of events in New Mexico. Theodore Blackstone was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. His plantation was divided and sold, the proceeds used in part to compensate those he had kept in bondage. In the spring of 1877, Dahlia discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled them both with joy and trepidation. "What if I don't know how to be a mother?" Dahlia confessed her fears as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset over the Pacific. "I barely remember my own." Zane took her hand. "You'll be wonderful. You have more love and strength in you than anyone I've ever known." Their son was born that winter, a healthy boy they named Frederick, after Zane's father. He had Dahlia's eyes and Zane's stubborn chin, a perfect blend of them both. As Frederick grew, so did their family. A daughter, Hope, arrived 2 years later, followed by twin boys, Thomas and James, in 1882. Their home, once so quiet, now rang with children's laughter and the chaos of family life. Through it all, Dahlia and Zane's bond remained unshakable. They faced challenges together: droughts that threatened their crops, illness that swept through the community, the normal strains of marriage and parenthood. But the foundation they had built, forged in those desperate days of flight and healing, sustained them. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Zane surprised Dahlia with a special gift: a journal bound in soft leather, her name embossed in gold on the cover. "For your stories," he explained as she ran her fingers over the smooth surface. The ones you tell our children and the ones you've yet to write." Dahlia's eyes filled with tears. "How did I get so fortunate?" she wondered aloud. "From slavery to this, a home, children, freedom, love." Zane drew her into his arms. "Not fortune, courage. You ran when others wouldn't. You fought when others couldn't. Everything we have, we built together." That night, after the children were asleep, they walked down to the shore, hand in hand as they had countless times before. The moon cast a silver path across the water, stretching to the horizon. "Do you ever think about that day?" Dahlia asked. "When you found me in the forest?" "Every day," Zane admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding past or taking a different route altogether." "I would have died there," Dahlia said simply. "But you didn't." Zane pulled her close, his arms encircling her waist. "You lived. We lived." Standing there at the edge of the continent, with the vast Pacific before them and their home behind them, they were as far from that new Mexican forest as they could possibly be, not just in distance, but in time, in circumstance, in possibility. The journey from a wounded runaway and a solitary cowboy to parents, farmers, community members, had been long. The scars remained. Dahlia's shoulder still ached before rain, and sometimes nightmares of pursuit woke her in the dark hours. Zane occasionally found himself checking escape routes, old habits dying hard, but these were merely shadows in a life filled with light. As they walked back to their home, where their children slept safely and dreams came true rather than remained distant hopes, Dahlia and Zane knew the truth of what they had found in each other: not just healing, but wholeness. Not just freedom, but belonging. Not just love, but home. The years continued to pass, each one adding new chapters to their story. Frederick followed in his father's footsteps, developing a talent for working with horses that surpassed even Zane's. Hope inherited Dahlia's gift with plants, expanding the garden into a thriving business that supplied herbs and remedies to the entire region. The twins, different as night and day despite their identical appearance, found their own paths: Thomas as a teacher in the local school, James as a builder whose structures dotted the coastline. In 1895, 20 years after they had first arrived in California, Dahlia published a book, a collection of stories based on the lives of those who had been kept in bondage after emancipation. She used different names and places, but the truth shone through in every word. The book found a receptive audience, bringing attention to a chapter of history many wished to forget. "You've given them a voice," Zane told her proudly after reading the final page. "Those who cannot speak for themselves." Dahlia, her hair now streaked with silver but her eyes as bright as ever, smiled. "I promised Mariah I would, and Samuel. I'm just keeping my word." Samuel had passed peacefully 5 years earlier, having lived to see his 90th year. Martha remained with them, a beloved member of their extended family, now helping to care for a new generation as grandchildren began to arrive. On a warm autumn evening in 1900, as the new century approached, the entire family gathered at the homestead to celebrate Dahlia and Zane's 25th wedding anniversary. Tables were set up in the yard, laden with food and flowers. Children ran playing among the trees, their laughter carrying on the sea breeze. Frederick, now 23 and recently married himself, raised a glass. "To my parents," he called, silencing the festive chatter. "Who taught us that love is stronger than hate, that courage overcomes fear, and that freedom is worth fighting for." Dahlia, seated beside Zane at the head table, felt tears spring to her eyes as everyone raised their glasses. Looking around at the gathered faces, her children, their spouses, grandchildren, friends who had become family, she was overcome with gratitude. Later, As the celebration continued around them, Zane took her hand and led her away from the crowd, down the familiar path to the cliffs overlooking the ocean. 25 years, he marveled, his voice gruff with emotion. Seems like yesterday and forever at the same time. Dahlia nodded, understanding perfectly. Do you remember what you told me that day in the forest, when I asked why you were helping me? Zane smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling. I said it was the right thing to do. Such a simple answer, Dahlia replied, touching his weathered cheek. But it changed everything. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that reflected on the calm surface of the Pacific. In the distance, a ship sailed along the horizon, bound for unknown shores. If I could go back, Zane said thoughtfully, to that day, to that moment when I found you wounded and afraid, I would tell myself one thing. What's that? Dahlia asked. That in saving you, I would find my own salvation. He drew her into his embrace, still strong despite his 60 years. That in healing you, I would become whole. Dahlia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. And I would tell myself that freedom is more than the absence of chains. It's the presence of love. As darkness fell and stars emerged above, they remained at the cliff's edge, two souls who had found each other against all odds. Behind them, the lights of their home glowed warm and inviting, a beacon of the life they had built together. From wounded runaway and solitary cowboy to the matriarch and patriarch of a thriving family, their journey had been one of healing, growth, and enduring love. What had begun with a gunshot in a New Mexican forest had blossomed into a legacy that would outlive them, both a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and the human heart's capacity to heal. And as they turned to walk back to the celebration, to the family waiting for them, Dahlia and Zane knew with absolute certainty that no matter what challenges the new century might bring, they would face them as they had faced everything else together.